Hi, thanks for joining us in another video in our series focusing on the ServiceNow emergency response applications. In this video, we're going to focus on the emergency exposure application. This is one of the applications that allows us to better help manage and understand the state of our employee base. So as we've mentioned in prior videos, out of the 4 applications, we have 3 applications that are really, in my opinion, used to manage our employee base, our end users, where the emergency response operations is more for how do we as a business function in emergency response mode. So focusing on the third of the 3 applications focused in on managing and maintaining the health of our employees, we're going to look at the exposure management. So the emergency outreach and self-report were both about getting data from our employees, right? With the self-report allowing our users to go to a portal page and provide information, and the outreach sending out notifications, emails, ServiceNow mobile notifications, and potentially even SMS messages, and responding and getting that data back to us. And then we have the question, well, what do we do with that data once we have it? Well, one of the answers to that question is we pump that data into the exposure management application. So the exposure management application can use 2 different functions to determine whether or not a user is potentially exposed or at risk. So if I have a user report back in any method, ideally the self-reporting or emergency outreach, that they are showing symptoms or anything else that might be, potentially exposed, we want to know if we have any potentially exposed and affected users in our workforce. So we can provide that user's information into this affected user status, and we can determine how we want to look to see if we have any affected users. And this application offers us 2 options. The first option being to use ServiceNow location data. So if your ServiceNow instance is configured to use locations, you can provide the location table that you'd like to use, and you can use your own custom location table if you want, and it'll dot walk that location table, meaning it'll get any subtables, location.building, etc. And it will go through that location table and get any users that share a location with that affected user and return that in a list, which I'll go over and show you. The other option we have is to use Outlook meetings, and this should have been worded a little better in my opinion, but this is O365 Exchange meetings. This does not work for on-prem Outlook or any other cloud services, Google, anything like that. There are some requests to get some other functionality added to this, but no word on whether or not that's happening as of right now. So if you do have O365, you can, very similar to the way other O365 integrations are created in ServiceNow, you can create an application in Azure, and you can provide the client ID and tenant ID. You provide a client ID, tenant ID, and certificate ID. If you provide all of this information, then when you submit that potentially affected user, it will go out to O365 and it will check against that user's calendar, and it will return any users that user has had meetings with in the affected date that you provided. So if we do create a new option to use Outlook meetings, it's going to tell us to provide a date range. We're going to do this example only using locational data. I don't have the O365 calendar meeting portion set up at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to punch myself in as an affected user, and you can see it comes up with my email address, and I have locational data provided. And I'm going to go ahead and hit save here, and this is going to create a exposure management record. Okay. And currently this record, it says it's using locations, Outlook meetings, and it's never been run. So this is the same record I'm in. Now this is the record where we would come to see if we have any impacted users. Once we create this record, we can then go run the diagnostics job against it. And this is what's going to look at which one of these are flagged, and it's going to go do the things. This only takes a moment. It could take longer depending on the size of your environment. I'm in a demo environment, so it runs through fairly quickly. If I go look at the diagnostic jobs now, I'll see that I have a diagnostic job that is associated to my diagnostic record, 1003. And here's my diagnostic job that's associated to my diagnostic record. So the diagnostic job isn't going to tell me much except for that it was a success using the location data. But if we go back to that diagnostic request, now I will see a list of all of the users that are potentially affected based on being in the same location I am. Now, the first request I had from a client when showing this off was, well, how can I drill into this a bit more? Because this is great. I have all of the users that are here in my department. So one thing that we can actually do, if we go into configure the list layout here, we can add a few more details. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to configure list layout. And under user here, well, first let's get into the right application. And in order to edit this, I'm going to change this to be the emergency exposure management application. So now I can edit these. Now if I expand user, click this here to expand it, I can actually go to user department. And I can add my user's department in front of location, and I can hit save. And now I have a department associated. So now I can sort this by department. And if I have users that are in the same department that I am, I have bad locational data in here, forgive me, but in a production environment, we would likely have better data. I could sort by department and I could say, okay, this affected user is part of the sales department. Even though everybody in this building is potentially impacted, my sales team is very likely impacted a bit more, right? So I'm going to notify them first. And that's how you use the emergency exposure management. This is really for, again, maintaining the health and well-being of our workforce. What we then choose to do with this data is really up to the company and how we're managing our business and workforce. Ideally, if we have these people exposed, we would want to let these users know that they have been potentially exposed. The last thing I want to mention as part of this video is one of the other requests I've had from clients was, well, using this emergency self-report and emergency outreach, how come it doesn't just make us exposure management records automatically if we have a user that is affected? And that is something that we at ITS Partners agree should be a thing. So we have created a customization that will automatically create an emergency exposure management record and run a diagnostic job if a self-report or an outreach response comes back in an affected state. So if we have a user mention that they are in quarantine or experiencing symptoms, then it's automatically going to run an exposure report and return a list of any users that may be exposed. If you're interested in seeing how that works, look forward to another video that I'm going to be releasing on the emergency response operations customizations and just some tips and tricks that we have. Thank you.